Spring drills are almost over for the New York Giants. Then there'll be a summer vacation for the players. And then Brian Daboll, sometime late in July, gets to get them back in the fold as they start training camp. What have we seen during the spring? What would you still like to see next week during the minicamp before the players go away? We'll talk about it next on the Big Blue Breakdown live. Hello again, everybody. I'm Paul Dottino, and welcome to the Big Blue Breakdown Live. We are back again, as always, once a week here on the New York Giants on SI YouTube channel and media network. You know, we usually try to do Wednesdays, as we've talked to you before, but we tried to get some Twitter posts up there today. We also told you during last week's show we would have to move this week's program to Thursday because today was a media availability. You see, the way these things work out with these off-season team activities, basically their spring practices, their passing camps, helmets, light shoulder pads, top jerseys, and basically shorts. So what happens is the team goes through about 5 weeks of these things, and they only have 1 day a week of media availabilities where they allow open practice for the media to come in, see what's going on. They make the coaches available to us to talk to. They make some players available for us to talk to. And so that's the reason why it's important for us here when we do this program to do it the night of a media availability so we can actually talk about things and bring you the kind of coverage that you want. You don't want speculation. You don't want hypotheticals. You want eyewitness accounts of what happened at the media session and what happened on the practice field. And so that's why we do what we do, and we have to occasionally move the program around. Now, let me give you a tip right off the bat. Next week is the mandatory minicamp, which means the Giants will have practices on Tuesday and Wednesday. Both of those days are open practices to the media, and both of those days will have media sessions where we'll be talking to players and coaches. After Wednesday's practice, the players get to go on summer hiatus and won't be back until training camp starts sometime late in July. We will also follow that schedule here on the Big Blue Breakdown. We will do a show live Tuesday night Eastern time at 8 o'clock, okay, to break down the first day of the mandatory veteran minicamp. We will also be back on Wednesday for the second day of the mandatory minicamp, and we'll do another show with you, 8 o'clock Eastern time at night. So that's Tuesday and Wednesday, and then we will go on hiatus just like the team does, and be back with you sometime in July as training camp opens up. We'll take a little bit of time off, a few weeks, not too long, but just a few weeks. The players are getting a vacation. The coaches are getting a vacation. There's nothing for us to talk about during those weeks, so we're going to take a break just like they will. So that's a bit of a programming note in terms of what's going to be coming up here on the Big Blue Breakdown Live. All right, in the meantime, let's have a conversation about what happened today. Well, first things first. Today was red zone drills, which means everything inside the 20, as you guys know. And one of the things that Coach Brian Daboll told us today is that the Giants have done more specific situational drills in their 7-on-7s and their 11-on-11s during the spring practices this year. Daboll said that every year they reevaluate and they tweak certain things, trying to find something better, something that will help them get better results. Well, the tweak that they made going into this year was that in these spring drills, they would have more situational 7-on-7s and 11-on-11s, whereby they're going to put a score and a time on the clock, and they're going to try to run a real-life series. or they're going to put the ball on a certain yard line and say, okay, we have 1 minute, no timeouts. Let's run a real life series. That's what we're talking about when we talk about situational drills during these spring sessions. So today there was a ton of red zone. First session was a 7-on-7, okay? And what did we see during that? Well, we saw Russell Wilson. They put the ball on the 15-yard line. Wilson lofts one into the left corner for Darius Slayton. Perfectly thrown ball, lollipop right into his hands for a touchdown. Next play, Wilson, bang, slant route to Wan'Dale Robinson, throws a dart right across the middle, threads the needle, touchdown Giants. I can't say enough about Russell Wilson's accuracy. Time after time after time. He has not had a subpar day of practice since he got to the Giants as a free agent a few months ago. He has consistently put the ball on the money. Has there been an occasional pass or two that goes awry? Yes, just like with anybody. But he has a very high level of consistency in terms of throwing accurately. I think that's important to note, folks, because he has, at 36 and a half years old, he's got some wear on his tire. But I think most of that wear is in his mobility. He still can move the pocket. He still can take off and run with the ball. So maybe he's lost a half a step in that particular facet of his game. The one thing he hasn't lost anything on is his arm. He can still throw the short tightrope or the short laser beam or the short frozen rope. Call it whatever you like. Coaches will use different phrases for that style of pass. He could still throw those without any problem at all. He can still throw the 50 to 60-yard bomb with no problem at all. The moon ball, as they call it, the big rainbow lollipop bomb that drops into the bucket, kind of like what Willie Mays would do when he would catch a ball, a basket catch in center field. He still does that with precision. So Russell Wilson physically still has the toolbox to vastly improve the Giants' quarterback position. The biggest key for me involving Wilson isn't about his skill set or his toolbox, because there's enough there to win. It's all about, can you keep him healthy? And can you keep the front of the pocket clean? You see, all those years he was in Seattle, and I've talked about this many a times, because he's probably about 5'11". He's rather diminutive in size. As defensive linemen and linebackers have gotten bigger, it's hard for him. If there's any pressure in the front of the pocket, it is hard for him to see over those guys. So what did Seattle do during all of those Pro Bowl seasons that he was with the Seahawks? They made sure either get the ball out quick or they would roll the pocket. Have a moving pocket. Because if he's got a moving pocket, he can now see, because he's going to have clear angles downfield. If he's just standing there in the pocket and the pressure comes from the front of the pocket, he is going to have too many bodies, arms and hands and helmets in front of him. That's what happens when you have a shorter quarterback. This is what happened with the Saints and Drew Brees. Same thing with Doug Flutie years ago when he was with the Bears and the Bills and the Patriots. This is what happens when you have a shorter quarterback. Okay? Not only do you have to protect him, but you have to make sure that the interior of your offensive line is getting the job done. Because the more pressure that comes into his face, the harder the angle is for him to be able to see over those people. So for me, the biggest variable that is going to impact Russell Wilson's ability to help the Giants win is about the front of the pocket. Can the center and the two guards, whoever they turn out to be, and we believe them to be John Michael Schmitz, we believe one of them to be John Runyon, and who knows, could the other one be Van Roten? Could it be Azudu? Who knows? But those three interior linemen basically bear the brunt of the responsibility to make sure that Russell Wilson has enough space and enough of an angle to see downfield to make the plays that he wants to make. Otherwise, what will the Giants have to do? They're going to have to rely on a moving pocket with a quarterback who's now 36 and a half years old and is a bit slower in doing those mobile things than he was years ago in Seattle. So I want to bring that to you because I think it's important to understand when we had Max Starks, the former offensive lineman who's now the radio color commentator for the Pittsburgh Steelers, on the program the night that Wilson signed. And he said he thinks he's got enough left in his tank for at least one more good season of competitive football. And he talked about this exact thing that I'm speaking to you about now, in terms of he needs to be able to get outside the pocket to find better, cleaner angles to get the ball downfield. Well, that's something that was emphasized in Seattle. So what I'm telling you is there's no question in my mind about Wilson's ability to still win in this league. But they are going to have to make sure that he has good enough conditions, good enough circumstances to succeed. Because if he's getting a ton of pressure from the front of the pocket, it's going to make life very difficult for him to consistently have to move the pocket and roll out and try to consistently make those kinds of plays, because he is not 25 and 26 years old anymore. He's now 36 years old. You don't want him having to do that the bulk of the time. Enough about that. But that's where I stand right now on Russell Wilson. Also in the 7-on-7s today, Jackson Dart throwing the ball to the left corner of the end zone. Bellinger pulled it in for a touchdown. Gorgeous throw. Again, nice touch on the ball. We've seen Dart throw these kinds of passes throughout the course of spring. Looped it in there right on the money. Another good day for Dart. And then Jameis Winston. He threw one into the right corner. Lofted it over the DB. And who was back there in the right corner of the end zone? Didn't have much room. And remember, running backs are shorter. It was Turbo Miller. Yeah, Turbo Miller. Ran a pass route into the back right corner of the end zone and had virtually no room to operate. And Winston looped it in. Perfect pass for a touchdown. So 7-on-7s in the red zone in the opening session of practice went exceptionally well for the Giants today. All right. By the way, if you'd like to comment on this program, okay, by all means, we have the chat over on the right side. We also have a link right underneath here. Do you see this right here? Right here underneath? There you go. Go to that StreamYard link. And if you have a microphone on your computer or your phone, you can make an audio phone call, just like I take them on Big Blue Kickoff Live during the day. Or perhaps if you'd like to do a video call and activate your camera, we could have a video call with you too. Please, by all means. I'm going to be here for at least the next hour as long as you guys are here. If you guys decide you don't have any comments or questions, then I'll go through my spiel from what happened today and I'll pack it in. I don't want to do that. I love talking Giants football. I hope you guys do too. All right, let me get to a comment as long as there's one up here on the chat already. Big Blue says, evening, Paul. How is Dart doing taking snaps under center? How's the grass looking in the stadium? Look forward to your insights during the show. 87 days to Washington. Opening day, of course, down there at Landover, Maryland, against the Commanders. All right, well, let's take this one at a time. How's the grass looking in the stadium? The World Cup Club Edition is obviously about to begin over at MetLife Stadium. I have seen pictures and video of the grass field in the stadium, and yeah, it looks terrific. It looks fine. Okay, great. They're going to play soccer on it. Doesn't do me any good. Doesn't impact me at all. I quite frankly could care less, except that it means a lot of traffic around MetLife Stadium over the course of the next week. That's not so good. That's question number one. We go back to his earlier comment. How is Dart doing taking snaps under center? He's doing fine. I have only seen, I believe, one mishandled ball under center by Dart so far this spring. And I'm not even, as I think about that now, was it just one? And it might have been because there was a false start and they didn't snap the ball on the proper count. That's how I'm remembering it right now. But he's done a fine job. It has not been an issue whatsoever. And so he's certainly getting a lot of reps. Brian Daboll told the media earlier today, Big Blue, that all of the quarterbacks in the room are getting a pretty equal amount of the reps, whether it's DeVito, Dart, Winston, or Wilson. He did say Wilson is getting the most. And I can tell you that because I've seen practice, so I do know. Russell Wilson has been getting more snaps than anyone else, but they are still trying to divvy them up relatively evenly. Now, the reason that Wilson and Winston have to get as many as they're getting, as you know, those guys are 1 and 2 on the depth chart, and those are the guys who are more likely to play this season. They both came in as free agents just a few months ago. So they need to throw to these receivers and these running backs and these tight ends. They also need to get the cadence going with the offensive line. They also need to make sure they have chemistry with the centers for those snaps that we're talking about. And quite honestly, they also need to get the tempo going with the flow in the huddle and in making the right calls. So, it makes perfect sense because some people would say, well, why aren't you giving Dart a whole ton of snaps? Because Dart is the young and up-and-comer and the potential future of the team. Well, no, that's nice. I mean, you want to get him snaps, you want to bring him along, but you can't do it at the expense of the two vets who are expected. We don't know if Winston's going to play, but Wilson's going to be the starter. You can't do it at the expense of getting those guys ready either. So the balancing act that Brian Daboll has decided to use is everybody gets a pretty fair share, but Wilson as the starter is getting the most snaps. All right. Let's go. I'll tell you more about practice in just a bit, but we're getting more comments. Arnold Stevenson says, good evening, Paul. Can you compare what you see from Wilson to Jones? Well, yes, actually I can. Arnold, there's no question that Wilson is consistently more accurate than Daniel Jones in terms of throwing the football. And I was a Daniel Jones fan. So let me make it clear. I don't think Daniel Jones did anything during practices that really caused you to throw up a red flag and be alarmed and be upset. I mean, did he have some inconsistent practices? Yes. And to be frank, he was more inconsistent than what I've seen from Russell Wilson. Wilson, I don't sit there and log every play because, as the coaches will tell you, anybody who takes stats and logs every play during these spring drills, is fooling themselves, because that's not what this is about. It's about the installations. It's about teaching guys. But the observation of Wilson's accuracy and his high level of consistency is valid. There's no doubt about that. Wilson also throws a consistently terrific long ball, but we've known that for well over a dozen years in the NFL. We've seen how many of those he continues to do it. And that's really the point, Arnold, from what I tried to tell you a little bit earlier in this program, is that there is no question, absolutely no question, that Russell Wilson still has the tools, specifically the arm, to make the Giants a winner this season. That's there. If the Giants don't do well this season, it's not going to be because Russell Wilson is shot and has no more gas. That's not going to be the reason. Okay? It's not. I say that with tremendous confidence. There'll be other reasons if the Giants don't have a good season, but it's not going to be because Russell Wilson is shot and over the hill and has nothing left. That's not true. That is absolutely not true. So don't point the finger there. What else can I say about Wilson? All right, so they're throwing more deep balls in practice than they threw with Jones. And I guess because he's new, Wilson is bringing, even at 36 and a half years old, he's bringing a strong, youthful energy. There's a real positive vibe about him. And I don't think that it's Jones's fault that he was unable to bring that to the team last spring. Let me explain. I tell people all the time, and Bill Parcells used to have this phrase, winning breeds winning and losing breeds. And it's one of the mantras about Parcells that I've always had embedded in my head, because he's 1,000% right. When you're winning and you form winning habits and you formulate emotions that push you into a positive direction, it's like the law of inertia, right? A body in motion tends to stay in motion. Well, that's what happens when you've had a lot of success. Unfortunately, the Giants over the last two seasons, 23 and 24, did not. Yes, we know about the two playoff season, but the last two seasons, there was not very much success. And when the snowball rolls downhill, it gets bigger and bigger, and it starts an avalanche. Like I said, a body in motion tends to stay in motion. Well, it goes in the wrong direction and starts bringing people with it. And subconsciously, you start to get caught into that big, huge ball of snow, and you start rolling downhill with it. And so I think Russell Wilson, with his Hall of Fame resume and his 2 trips to a Super Bowl, including 1 Super Bowl ring, he's come here to the Giants to try to resuscitate something at the end of his career. We know what he did in Seattle. Okay, great. 2 very subpar years in a bad situation with the Denver Broncos. We understand that. He goes to Pittsburgh. There was some issues there too that didn't quite work out for him. Obviously missed a month of the season because of a leg injury at the beginning of the year. That certainly was not a good way to get off on the right foot. Then we've heard reports out of Pittsburgh that the offensive coordinator with the Steelers and Russell Wilson did not particularly get along very well. They weren't so copacetic with their game plans. They weren't so copacetic in terms of how Wilson wanted to run the offense and call audibles at the line. Okay, for whatever the reason, Russell Wilson, in his mind, has something to prove this year as he comes to a new team. At 36 and a half years old, he's approaching the New York Giants roster as if he's a rookie, trying to open eyes and trying to prove to everybody that he still has some of that gloss on him. And that's very good if you're the Giants. You want a guy who still has an awful lot of talent to be determined, to be eager to reprove himself again, and to maximize whatever it is that he's got left. And I see that in Russell Wilson. So that intensity, that focus, that determination to bring forth whatever the winning attitude was and the winning atmosphere and the winning intangibles and the winning emotions that he's been carrying with him, well, he's letting that all back on the table right now. He's slamming his fist down on the table and he's saying, I don't care that I've kind of struggled and scuffled along through the last 3 seasons. I'm Russell Wilson. I believe in myself. I believe in what I've done to get to this point in my career. And the heck with those last 3 years. I've got more in me. I've got better football in me. I've got the kind of football that I played years ago still in me. Now, Russ, I'm going to add this to you. Yeah, you're probably a little bit slower running out of the pocket. All right, that's probably the one noticeable difference. All right, he's going to be a little slower running out of the pocket, but that's on the Giants now. That's on the rest of this team, specifically the offensive line, to limit the times that he's got to run for his life. Look, go back to his days in Seattle. He was getting sacked 35, 40, 45 times a year. They did not always have good offensive lines out there, but what did they do? They ran the ball, and they ran it a lot, and they used a ton of play action. Russell Wilson is excellent at play action. That's not something you lose. Doesn't matter how old you are. If you're really good at play action, you can do that till you're 80 years old. Okay? Russell Wilson is still very good at play action. So the Giants just need to make sure that the offensive line does an adequate job, and they make sure that if there are any breakdowns, they've got this thing schemed up so that he can maximize what he's bringing to the table. All right, so that kind of answers your question, Arnold. That's what I see in terms of Wilson compared to Jones. Jones obviously has more speed at this stage of his career than Wilson does. He's obviously a lot taller and longer than Wilson. So that thing we talked about with a shorter quarterback, that's not an issue with Daniel Jones. So you don't necessarily have to scheme up passing lanes for him or try to find ways to get him a clear angle to throw the ball over the middle. So there are differences. And then obviously, I mean, again, look at the resumes. The resumes are quite different. So anyway, those are some of the thoughts about Wilson and about Jones. All right, we got some more chats here, so let me keep going to some of these chats, and then we'll get back to some of the plays we saw today at the workout. Armand Duda says, Paul, how's Scatteraboo looking at practice? 4th-round draft pick out of Arizona State. He's been working on the side with the trainers. He has not participated as of yet. Coach says he's doing some work, though, with the trainers and doing well. Nothing has been identified specifically as to what it is that he is dealing with. But also, he happens to be the one unsigned member of the Giants draft class. So that's also something to keep in mind. He's got to get that contract signed so that he can be a full participant in the training camp once it starts at the end of July. Timothy Monet says, Paul, what are some undrafted rookie free agents that you can see finding their way onto the roster? All right, let me pull up my notes here. I'll tell you this. Timothy, every year, I always pick a sleeper of the undrafted rookie free agents who I think has the best shot to make it. I get it right almost every year. If the guy doesn't land on a 53, he lands on a practice squad. He doesn't get kicked out of the building. Here's the problem, okay? The Giants are a much better team now, roster-wise, talent-wise, depth-wise, than they have been the last couple of seasons. So it's going to be a lot harder for any of these guys to make the 53. Here's what I'll tell you. By position, there are guys who have made plays and had, at least, if not a few flashes, maybe even more than a few flashes during the spring. That doesn't mean that they're going to have those flashes during training camp or during the preseason, because the stakes rise every month you go down on the calendar. What we see now is nice, but it's what you do in July and August that's really going to matter. June helps, but it's not the impetus to get you on a roster. So I'll just go position by position. At wide receiver, I've seen Felton and Wells. I should probably give you first names because you guys won't really necessarily know them by last name very well. DeQuan Felton, Juice Wells, Jordan Bly, Bo Collins, Dylan DeCambry. All of those guys, that's 5 receivers I just mentioned. All 5 of those guys have at least flashed during the course of spring practices. And I don't think any of them necessarily are going to make the 53, but I think it's one heck of a fight to see which ones of those guys or how many of those guys make it to the practice squad, because I think there's a lot of talent in that receivers room. Let's see. At offensive line, no one drafted rookie free agents that have stuck out for me there. At tight end, Jermaine Terry has actually flashed a couple of times, but, I don't see the Giants keeping more than 3 tight ends. And with Johnson, Bellinger, Manhertz, Fedoni, Dulcich, they're all ahead of Terry, who would be 6th on the depth chart right now. But could I see him potentially sticking on the practice squad? I could. Running back. There is one interesting running back that I like. Rashawn Baker really intrigues me. He's 6 feet, 220 pounds, okay? If you know anything about me, you know I love power backs. He's a power back, and I'm intrigued by him. I'd like to see him on the practice squad. Defensive line-wise, nobody really sticks out there. Linebacker, Trace Ford had a really nice day today at practice. I've seen him flash and make some plays. He's an outside linebacker. I've seen him do some things on the pass rush. I've seen him do some things in the defensive system. I think he's an intriguing guy potentially for the practice squad. In the secondary, Makari Page and Donnell Fortune. Page is safety, Fortune at corner. I have seen both of those guys make a couple of flash plays. Nothing necessarily consistent, but I have seen them at one time or another get noticed. And then on special teams, nobody in particular there. So, Timothy, that's my answer to you. It's a really, more than anything else, it's a really good wide receivers room. Honestly, Timothy, that's where I see most of the undrafted rookie free agent talent being collected. The rookie wide receiver room. They've got some guys in that room who I think these guys could play football. Now, are any of them stars to the point where they're going to make the 53? Again, I just don't see it. Neighbors, Slayton, Robinson, Hyatt, those four guys are on the team. How many are you going to keep? 5 or 6? Well, here's the problem. Smith-Marsette is definitely going to be your kickoff return guy, and he is a wide receiver by trade. So he's going to be on the team. So he's 5. Bryce Ford-Wheaton last year was your best gunner. He's also a wide receiver by trade. I don't see them cutting him either. He's 6. Well, that's it. You got no room for any of these rookie free agents. I don't see any room for them. And that's not to say anything of little Jordan Humphrey, the veteran from Denver, who is here as a free agent, and Russell Wilson really likes him a lot. Or Zach Pascal from the Arizona Cardinals, who was signed as a veteran free agent. So it's virtually impossible to see any of these wide receivers making the Giants 53, Timothy. But do I think they've got something to offer? Yeah, I do. It'll be interesting to see how many of them that they decide to keep on the practice squad. Of course, they got to clear waivers first, and depending upon what these guys show during the preseason, there may be teams out there that want to scap them up, and that's always a risk you got to take too. Anyway, appreciate the question, Timothy. Thank you. Armand Duda says, I was a Jones fan too, but happy to hear Wilson is more consistent and accurate. How does Winston compare? Winston was my choice to sign for next year. Was surprised when Wilson was signed soon after. Jameis Winston is much more like Daniel Jones. Inconsistency is the key word there. Now, the last 2 practices, better. I thought today's practice was a pretty good one for Winston. But he makes some really nice throws. He's got the skills. His toolbox is good. Folks, let me make sure that I'm very clear on this. Jameis Winston has a really nice toolbox. He's tall. He's long. He's got a strong arm. He can zip it. He can drop it in there. There's a lot to like in terms of his toolbox. It's all there. But in terms of his performance, well, what has he been in the league 8 years now? I want to say it's 8. Let me see. Let's get this exactly right. Okay. He's been in the league 10 years. It's not even 8. It's 10 years. And the numbers, which sometimes can be deceiving, are not. 154 career touchdown passes and 111 career interceptions. Even last year with Cleveland, when he started 7 games and appeared in 5 others, he had 13 touchdown passes and 12 interceptions. In short, that's what Jameis Winston is. That's what he's always been. And after 10 years in the league, that's what he always will be. There are going to be throws he makes that are going to make you feel really good. And then there are going to be throws that he makes that just make you shake your head. That's why he's best suited, certainly at this stage of his career, to be an NFL backup. You hope that if you have to put him in a game, that you can run the ball effectively and lean more heavily on the run. Because the fewer times he throws the ball, by the very nature of mathematics, the fewer chances there'll be that there'll be an errant throw that may get picked off. And that's just the way it is, Armand. I wish I could tell you otherwise, but that's the way it is. I will tell you, in terms of today, Winston also threaded the needle in 11 on 11s on a pass to Bo Collins this morning. Terrific throw. Also, he hit Cambry on a bomb down the right sideline. A long bomb, and it was right on the money. It was a rainbow throw. You would have thought that Russell Wilson had made the pass. So, he's got it in him. He's got it in him to make really good throws. They're just not there often enough, which is why he's basically been a backup for the last 5 years of his career. Armand says, I like the move, though. I guess he means about Wilson and Winston. Good to have two veterans starting at a backup quarterback. Exactly. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I agree. All right, Timothy Menez is back with us again and says, Paul, do you have concerns about the run defense outside of Alexander? It doesn't feel like they did much to address it. Oh, no, actually, they did. They did a whole lot. Timothy, maybe you didn't see earlier before the draft. They didn't want to draft hungry, right? Now, they did take Alexander at the top of the third round, and that's a legit primetime spot. And when you take a guy there, you're expecting him to at least be a rotation player as a rookie. But they've also signed some guys. Roy Robertson Harris comes over from Seattle. Jeremiah Ledbetter comes over from Jacksonville. Both of these guys are veterans, free agents that the Giants added to the defensive tackle spot up front. DJ Davidson has gained an awful lot of weight. He is very, very large now. He was kind of a tweener. They wanted him, I believe, to be a three technique when he was drafted. At least that's what I understood. He doesn't look like a three technique anymore. Now he looks like a backup nose tackle. So you've got some choices in there. You still have Nacho. Nunez Roches is still on the team as well. So, and of course, there's Elijah Chapman. And there's Jordan Riley, who is still here. Now, Riley's very intriguing because he's got the frame and he's got, again, we're going to use that word, the toolbox to be a really good backup nose tackle. He really does. But again, it's the consistency problem that we're talking about. So what the Giants did by adding Ledbetter, Robertson Harris, and then drafting Alexander, they've given themselves numbers. Alexander, the biggest name because he's a third-round draft choice, and there's a lot of high hopes for him. I thought he'd gone in the second round. I was very happy to see him there, and in fact, that was the whole reason the Giants decided that when they made the trade for Dart, they needed to hold on to that pick. They were willing to trade their later third-round pick, but they were not going to trade their early third-round pick because they wanted to get somebody who could help them right away and play. Darius Alexander is a guy who's going to be right into that rotation in the middle of that defensive line, effective immediately. So they've added numbers. They've added some talent. youth and experience. They've also added versatility. You also have a guy like Chauncey Golston, who I see him as a defensive end. I don't think the Giants are going to use him as a three-technique defensive tackle. I think they're going to use him as a defensive end next to, one of the stand-up edge rushers. But that's how I see him being used. I think that's his best position, with his hand in the dirt. And I think that's what the Giants are going to wind up doing with him. Like when they use a wide 9 formation, like what the Eagles have done an awful lot of in recent years. I think you'll see some more of that out of the Giants. And Golston's going to be hand in the dirt, trying to stop the run off the edge. So Golston does give them a lot of flexibility, though. And that's a really good thing. Obviously, so does Abdul Carter, who was drafted as a edge rusher, but can play off-ball linebacker and certainly has the ability to rush from the inside as well. Now, I know he's more of a pass rushing factor, not as much of a run factor, according to your question. You want to understand about the run defense. Abdul Carter can play run defense too. Trust me. So, Timothy, I appreciate the question. I do think that they have done some quieter things to address it, and I think it will be effective. I also believe that the versatility and the talent with their newfangled defensive line and their ability to flop guys in and out and change from a 3-4 to a 4-3, because I do think we're going to see some of that. I think they're going to be able to keep blockers off of Bobby Okereke. And the other improvement you're going to see in this Giants interior run defense this year is that I expect Okereke to get back to what he was a couple of years ago when they first signed him. Last year, the Giants defensive line did not do enough to keep blockers off of Okereke. As a result, he was getting run into a lot and getting bodied and pushed out of plays far too often. He is a run and hit linebacker. He needs some space to operate. I believe with the additions that the Giants have put up front on their defensive line, they will be able to occupy those blockers so that they don't get to the second level and basically harass and eliminate Okereke from a lot of running plays. He's going to have the ability now, much like we talked about Russell Wilson needs a clean front of the pocket. Think of Bobby Okereke at middle linebacker as a quarterback on defense, okay? What does he need? He needs a clean front of the pocket. He needs his defensive front, his defensive linemen, to make sure they control the line of scrimmage and don't let those blockers get through the line to the second level where they're now on top of Okereke and taking him out of the play. Same concept. It really is, just on the other side of the ball. Keep Okereke clean so that he can roam up and down between the tackles and make plays. So I think there's a lot of reasons to believe the Giants' rush defense will be better. Thank you for the comment. Armand Duda says Wilson works best with a good running back, brings out the play action. There's no question about that. 2,000% agree with you. Exactly why I said for months the Giants needed to draft a power back. Somebody who is going to work hand in hand with Tyrone Tracy. Somebody who has a different skill set than Tyrone Tracy. Preferably a power back who is going to be able to also catch the ball so that at least you still have the threat of the pass in the game when that guy is on the field. And they got Cam Skattebo, who fits the bill on all fronts. In fact, Tyrone Tracy talked about Cam Skattebo today. He was specifically asked about him and talked about how Tracy, that is, believes, he's more of a speed guy, more of an elusive guy. And he goes, actually, Scatterbo can do a bit of everything, but he's much more of a power and strength guy. It never made sense to me why there was some people who wanted the Giants to draft another running back for the room, but they wanted a quicks guy, a possible third down guy, or a possible guy with speed who was going to have elusiveness and jukes. And I was like, I don't see where you're coming from there. That's like adding more salt to the tomato sauce. No, you pinch your salt to the tomato sauce. You got to add oregano. You already got a pinch of salt in there. Add oregano to the sauce. And so the Giants got their oregano in Cam Scatterbo. And I think that's the key. The contrasting 1-2 punches that they have are really going to help Russell Wilson, especially in short yardage, goal line, red zone, 4-minute offense. Having a power running back, to me, is an absolutely mandatory facet of an offense. I mean, look, I'll make it simple for you. A car has to have tires, brakes, right? Transmission, carburetor, air filter. It needs all these things to work. I'm of the opinion that you have to have a power back on your team, just like you have to have brakes on your car. You have to have a power back to have a complete football team. The Giants got one. You guys knew that already because I've been telling you this for a long time. Duda says, I didn't notice Scatterbo has yet to sign. No, he has not. But I don't think that's going to be much of an issue. Armand Duda also says, yes, the cream rises to the top in July and August. Yep. Armand also says, Bo Collins is the only undrafted free agent receiver I know from college. I'm a Notre Dame fan. Armand, he has flashed on a few occasions, not just once or twice, but more than that. He's got some ability. I don't see how he gets on the 53 here. Could he get on a 53 somewhere else? I suppose he could. I say for sure you keep him around. Again, this is the deepest. The depth chart at wide receiver is really healthy. There are a lot of guys at the back end who I'm sure that they're going to want to keep around. Oh, there's Tudo again. There you are, my man. Oh, this guy never stops. Always here. Always can count on him. Now let's see what he says here today. Greetings from our club, currently training in Swansea, Wales. Tudo, for those of you guys who don't know, he's part of the Italian rugby team. And, we always hear from him every week. And they are everywhere and anywhere as they prep for their upcoming match. We always wish him well. And once again, this time joining us from Wales. And I don't believe, since he's been part of our program, I don't believe he's ever told us he was in Wales before. I think this is the first time that he's caught up to us from Wales, the home of the legendary singer Tom Jones, right? It's not unusual. No, never mind. I don't think you guys need to hear me sing. Oh, Jay Cunningham says, I hope this offense can get off to faster starts this year. Your thoughts? Well, there's no question. Look, the team needs to get off to a fast start. Jay, I had this conversation earlier today on the Big Blue Kickoff live show. Wins are not created equal in the National Football League. They're not. Division wins are worth more because your division wins are your first tiebreaker. And with only 17 games on the schedule, mathematics indicate that there's a better chance you're going to have ties at the end of the season than there are in hockey, basketball, or baseball, because there are so many more games. The fewer games you have, the more likely at the end of the season you're going to have teams with the same record. Well, the Giants open the season in Washington, in Dallas, and then come home for the Chiefs and the Chargers. Again, I've stated this so many times. You want to be 2-2 after the first 4 games, right? Well, it matters which 2 you win. Now, there may be some of you out there who think I'm nuts, and that's okay. I don't mind. But if you tell me the Giants will lose to Washington and Dallas and then upset Kansas City and the Los Angeles Chargers, well, they're 2-2. Okay. That's okay. That's digestible. Sure. But you want to win your division games. I'm greedy about this. All wins are not worth the same. I'm greedy. If you want the Giants to be 2-2 after 4 games, you want to beat Washington and Dallas, or at least get one of them. Split the 2 games in the division and then split the 2 AFC games. That would certainly be digestible. All right. Let's see what we got here. Armand says, once again, I agree with you on power backs being essential. Never understood why fullbacks have faded from offense in the NFL. Well, you know why, Armand? Because everybody got enthralled with video game football. As the rules kept changing and encouraging more passing, teams were like, okay, this is the way the rules are going. We're going to take advantage of the rules. And we're going to throw the ball around the yard more. And that makes perfect sense, right? It certainly does. Why wouldn't you do that as a coach? They're going to change the rules to make passing a bigger part of the game. Well, then you're going to take advantage of those rules and you're going to throw the ball around more. I understand that. But I also believe that Football 101 tells you have to be balanced and you have to be able to situationally run the football. You don't have to do it all the time, but situationally, when the game flow calls for it, whether it's the score, the position on the field, how much time is left, when situationally you are required to run the football to give your team the best chance to win or to put your team in the best position, and everybody in the stadium knows that, you need to still be able to run it. That's the key. It was the key to the 2011 Giants Super Bowl team. You'll remember, they're the only Super Bowl champion to have ranked last in the league during the regular season in team rushing. But what did they do? Down the stretch, during the final month of the season, and then through the postseason, they situationally ran the ball effectively. That's the key. Can you run the football and command the respect of the other team's defense in those strategic spots where it's beneficial to run the football? When everybody knows you're going to run it and you can still run it. That's the key. You don't have to run for 150 yards a game or 140 yards a game. Look, would I love to see the Giants run for 130 yards a game? I absolutely would. But if they only run for 110 or 115 a game, that's okay, providing they run it in key spots. Run it in the red zone, and plow that ball in for a touchdown so that you're not spreading out the offense and settling for incompletions and have to kick a field goal and take 3 points instead of 7. Be able to pound the ball out of your own 10-yard line. Be able to run the ball with 4 minutes to go and a 3-point lead and grind out those first downs, grind out the clock. Everybody knows you're going to do it. But guess what? We're going to get those first downs anyway. Do what you can. Try to stop us. We're moving the chains. It's about situational running games. You have to have a situational running game to maximize your chances to win. It doesn't mean it can't be done if you don't have that. But every coach has a responsibility, every GM has a responsibility to give his team the best chance to win, which means do what you can to give them the ability to succeed with a situational running game. And of course, given the fact that Russell Wilson is such a great play-action passer, well, that opens up the book for a situational running game now, because there are more situations given his efficiency as a play-action quarterback to where running the ball is effective. It was just so obvious. I mean, for those of you, and I know a lot of fans out there wanted Cam Scatterbo because you saw the tape and you realized what he could add to the team. But for those of you who did not understand and did not realize it, getting a power back on this roster, especially with a play-action quarterback like Russell Wilson, it was mandatory. Mandatory. I thought Scatterbo was not going to get out of the third round, but I wanted him in the worst way. Somehow they got him at the beginning of the fourth. I think that was such a perfect draft pick for them, as was Alexander at the top of the third round, as was Carter. We talked about that, right? There were 3 blue chippers in the draft: Ward and the Heisman Trophy winner. And right now, for some strange reason, why am I blocking out right now on the Heisman Trophy winner? I don't know why I'm doing that right now, but Travis Hunter, of course. Ward, Travis Hunter, and Abdul Carter. Take whichever guy's left at number 3, and you're a winner. Well, they did. First 3 picks that the Giants took in rounds 1, 3, and 4. And then, of course, made the deal to get back into the bottom of the first round for Jackson Dart. Wow. Right now, smelling like a rose. Let's see what else we have here today. Oh, here we go. Let's see. Tudo's coming back at us again. And a double dip by Tudo. All right. Let's see here. He goes, Paulie, we're here only for joint training and practices. Mate, we usually work hardest during off season, and during the regular season, we let muscle memory do the work. All right. So no match this week in Wales for Tudo and his crew. All right. Well, so we don't have any well wishes for the game because there's no game or match, but we can wish you well in your training and hope that everything continues to progress. And much like the Giants are trying to build, we hope you guys are trying to build, Tudo. So all the best to you and your guys. Cody says, good evening. Hi. Oh, let's see here. And we got some guys talking amongst themselves on the chat. Here's Cody Dunbar again, says, I'm so happy we drafted Dart and Alexander plus Scatterbo. Good luck to Walter Nolan. Yeah. Walter Nolan, another really good player coming out of the draft. Excuse me. Now, I'm not sure. Is that because you're wishing him luck because you like him as a player? Or are you telling me he just got hurt? Let me just see here. Because I did not look at the NFL news wire today as I was at Giants practice. No, it does not look like he has gotten hurt. Good. I'm glad to hear that because I certainly did not want that to be the case. Nolan is another terrific prospect, one of several who we all knew was going to be going high in this draft. All right, what do we have here? Cody wants to know, Paul, who do you like hanging out or interviewing out of all the Giants players? Well, look, that's a difficult question to answer because I'm about to enter my 43rd consecutive season of covering New York Giants football. That's a lot of players. That's a lot of coaches. That's a bunch of GMs, a bunch of scouts. That's a lot of people that I've come into contact with over the last 43 years. Who do I like to interview the best? Well, let's see. On this particular team, let me go back and look at the depth chart one more time. Let me look at the depth chart and just see. Based on, I'll just give you last year. Okay, I'll give you last year. Who was my favorite Giant to interview last season? I would probably say Darius Slayton. Slayton is a pro's pro. He won the George Young Good Guy Award from the Giants Media Corps last season. Every year they present an award to a player in the locker room who was the most cooperative during the course of the year. And Darius Slayton won that award for the 2024 season. And I think that was very justified. So I would say Darius Slayton would be my answer for the 2024 roster. It remains to be seen, as 2025 unfolds, how many of some of the newer players I will enjoy talking to and who I'll get to know. But I would say Darius Slayton right now for this past season would be the guy that I would vote for right there. And I have other guys who I really get along with and I chat up with, but in terms of actually doing an interview, yeah, Darius Slayton would be my guy. Jay Cunningham says, I would prefer the running game to move the chains when needed. And that's exactly what I'm trying to tell you, Jay. It's about situational running. And it's not okay to surprise people and run the ball in spots by surprise. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about running the ball in spots where everybody knows you're going to run it and they still can't stop you. That's what that's about. Jay also says that's been a huge missing element to this offense. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. I mean, it's obvious. Like I've said, it is mandatory. In my book, it is mandatory to have a power back and to be able to pound it and grind it out when necessary. And for a lot of the last decade, the Giants have not had that. For a few years in there, yes. And that's not just on the running backs. Now, it also, when you say to have that running game on occasion or in situations, well, your tight ends and your offensive line have to be able to create some room for that back to do what he does. You can't just expect him to move the pie if there's three people, diving at his legs 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage. And that was part of the whole Barkley issue. I thought Barkley had enough power to do that. He could execute that kind of running game if necessary. But you had to give him some room to get started. And obviously, the Philadelphia Eagles, with one of the premier offensive lines in football, you see what he did with them. This was no surprise. From the second he signed with the Eagles, we all knew what was going to happen. He was going to have a monster year. It made sense. 2 + 2 will always equal 4, folks. And Saquon Barkley, with a good offensive line behind him, is always going to put up big numbers. That's it. It's elementary. Armand's back, and he says, feels like we haven't had the same impact on offense since we lost that dynamic duo of Jacobs and Bradshaw. I think Scatterbull will provide the kind of atmosphere and the kind of punch and the kind of adrenaline that Brandon Jacobs provided. And I saw Brandon at practice about a week and a half ago. He was one of the Giants legends who came to talk to the team. And I talked to him in the lobby. He was getting ready to get his car to go back to the airport. And I told him, I said, did you get a chance to talk to Scatterbull? He goes, yeah. He goes, I did. And I said, good. Because don't get me wrong, Brandon, he's not you. He certainly doesn't have your frame and your size, but he's got your attitude and he's got that running angry kind of style. And he's got the emotion, the adrenaline, the intensity, the ferocity that you brought to this team. He can bring that to this team, just like you did to your 2 Super Bowl champions. So I'm with you. And Jacobs understood exactly what I meant. And Cody says he's just wishing luck to Walter Nolan for this season. Understood. Oh, Oman. Hey, look at that. Armand also a super user as well. So let me thank him. Much appreciated, Armand. We thank him on the chat for being a super user. He says, thank you for all the time and effort you put in for us fans, Paul. How do you think we have improved in the secondary? Well, Armand, let me put it to you this way. They spent a lot of money on Javon Holland, who they believe is the kind of guy who makes important plays. He has an innate ability to do that. He's very smart. He's very professional, focused. He works hard. Obviously has the toolbox as well. But they like his innate ability in their mind to make big plays. The Giants did not have enough playmakers on defense last year. And that's why they went after Holland in free agency. They made him a big ticket item, and they now have him and, of course, Tyler Nubin, who we all think the world of. Tyler Nubin, the arrow is pointing really high up on him. So they love their safety combination. And by the way, Dane Belton, he did it again today. Got his hand on a ball. Let me go back to my notes here. It was a deflected pass by Russell Wilson, which was pulled down by Theo Johnson on the goal line. Terrific play by Belton, terrific play by Theo Johnson. So you had a check mark on defense and a check mark on offense on the same snap. Belton consistently is around the ball ever since he's come to the Giants. Whenever he's on the field, he gets his hands on the ball. He's around the play. Now, as I've said to some people, he is an excellent number 3 safety. Third safety, if you're going to play a 3-safety package. Obviously, to this point, he hasn't done enough to become one of the starting 2 safeties. They drafted Nubin in the 2nd round. There's a reason for that. They signed Holland to a big contract. There's a reason for that. Okay? You don't do those things if you think that Dane Belton is going to be a star in the lineup. Obviously, they see there's a ceiling there. In baseball, right? In baseball, you may have a platoon guy who's hitting .310 with a bunch of ribbies and home runs strictly as a platoon guy. But then when you play him full time, well, all of a sudden that efficiency isn't there and the production isn't there anymore. And you see that, oh, now he's really only a 240 hitter and he strikes out a lot and he doesn't advance runners a lot. Well, because now you're asking him to do too much. Well, I think maybe the evidence kind of shows us by what the Giants have done with the first and second safety position. They believe Dane Belton is best suited. They can get the most out of him if he is the third safety. So I love that three-man combination. You know what I think about Tate Banks. If you've watched me or listened to me at all, I'm a big Tate Banks guy. I had targeted him for the Giants in the first round a couple years back. He was the guy, like, that's the guy they got to get, and they got him. Nice rookie season, inconsistent last year. He's got the toolbox, though. And so far, he's had a good spring. And even Shane Bowen, the defensive coordinator, has talked about how they understand each other better. And there's more comfort there. And he's asking a lot of good questions. I think we're going to see the real Tay Banks in year 3. We know what Paul Dottino is. He's been a very good player who at times has covered the number 1 receiver while he was with the New Orleans Saints. So, I mean, you got to really love the safety situation. You got to like the outside corners. And then you got Drew Phillips at nickel. Terrific rookie season for Drew Phillips. Now, are you concerned about that? Well, Cordell Flott has had a really good spring. Last year was his best season with the Giants. He was also his healthiest. But prior to that, he had a lot of trouble dealing with injuries. So, can Cordell Flott stay healthy? If he does, I like him as the backup boundary corner. But it would not at all bother me if the Giants decided to sign a veteran corner free agent at some point before opening day. Bring in somebody who's got a lot of experience, a lot of guile, a lot of wiliness, craftiness, who could, kind of be a little bit of an insurance policy on that depth chart. But I'm telling you right now, there's no doubt, Armand, this secondary is much, much improved. And when you consider the improvements to the defensive line that I talked about earlier, and we know the pass rush with now Thibodeau and Carter and Burns, man, I'm going to go on record. I'm telling you, I'm going to go on record. I said it last year. The potential of last year's defense was possibly a top 10, but it didn't work out that way. They had troubles with the scheme in the system. They had guys getting hurt. The offense couldn't, keep the defense off the field. And it just turned into a disaster in so many ways. But I do think with the upgrades that we've seen, significant upgrades on defense with this team, I think Chauncey Golston, I really like him a lot. There's no reason why the Giants won't have a top 10 defense this year. I don't know, top 5. I don't know about that. But they certainly got to be at least a top 10. And that's because they've upgraded the line, the backers, and big-time upgrade in the secondary with Adebo and Holland. They spent a lot of money on both of those guys. Both of those fellas were very high at their respective positions in free agency. And Cody Dunbar just asked, how does Adebo and Holland look? Both guys are all over it. They're pros, and they've got the toolbox, and they've got the attitude, and they're young veterans just coming into their primes. Really good moves by Joe Shane. Cody says, hope Dart learns everything from Russell and Jameis at the end next year. Dart for starting quarterback. Well, that's the plan, Cody. That's the plan. Have Jackson Dart redshirt this season, learn as much as he can from those two guys, and then potentially next year be the guy. Anything that happens this year, if something should happen this year, well, you hope for the best for Jackson Dart. But right now, you'd like to think that his plan of attack or the program for Jackson Dart is to redshirt this year, learn what you can, and then have a terrific first year when he takes a shot at it in 2026. Cody wants to know, Paul, you're going to play Madden 26 this year? No, probably not, Cody. I'm all about real football, man. I dig into the real sport. I watch enough tape. I dig through enough of stats, look at enough of game plans, look at enough diagrams. I'm about the real game. I'm not about a video game. And I also like to get out and about. I'm much more of a physical person who likes to get out. I don't like to just sit down in front of a screen and play for hours on end with a joystick and a push buttons and computers. And no, that's not me. I need to get out and about. I have too much energy to sit in front of a screen and play a video game. Believe me. Aiden Fink says, let's see. Wait a minute. Did I lose him? Oh, here he is. Here late tonight, but wanted to pop in for a bit. Still enjoyed the blind rankings on BBK yesterday and participated along, even though some of it consisted way before my lifetime. Okay, I understand, Aiden. No problem. All good. That was a very goofy exercise we did on the show yesterday. Very goofy. But it was fun. I tried to tell you folks, anybody who listened to Big Blue Kickoff Live yesterday, I tried to tell you guys a lot of fun stories that related to some of the things that they were throwing at us in the blind rankings. I hope that was fun and entertaining and maybe informative, because the game itself is, the blind rankings, whatever. Cody says, Graham Gano back to his old kicking. Yeah, we've seen Gano out at spring practices. He has kicked. He has kicked well. He appears to be fully healthy. So does McAtamney, the rookie from Rutgers last year, who did get in a game. He was on practice squad most of the season. He is dramatically improved. He's doing much, much better on his field goals. In fact, today I want to say he hit 5 out of 6. And there was I think 3 of them were like from 50 or more. So it's going to be very interesting. I mean, I don't doubt Graham Gano's ability at all, but I do think the Giants feel good about McAtamney. If they've got to go in that direction, I think they're starting to feel like they could be comfortable there if they need to be. Aiden Fink says, could this be the best Giants pass rush of all time? Well, I don't know about that. I mean, Aiden, they had a guy named LT play here for a while. And on that same squad, Leonard Marshall, George Martin, Carl Banks. I mean, you're asking a lot. Let's see here. Aiden wants me to play Madden also. Not going to happen. Armand Duda says, always love hearing Giants history. And who's better to tell us than Paul? He's been here since the great Bill Parcells. Yeah, it was my first season. 1983 was the first season I started covering this team. Bill Parcells and Dan Reeves and Tom Coughlin. I've been around some really, really great coaches. And, of course, some great GMs, too. George Young's in the Hall of Fame. Ernie Accorsi. I mean, man. And, Joe Shane's story still to be written. And Jerry Reese certainly had a measure of success here as well, too. Don't let me forget about him. Oh, all right. So we got about 5 minutes left to the program. If there's anything else you guys want to chime in on, either on the chat or a video or audio call. We're going to go to 9:30 Eastern time tonight. We have over 750 live viewers on the program at the moment. We certainly appreciate you guys for coming in. Once again, I know this was an off day, right? Usually we're on Wednesday night, and I'm sure that there are some of our regulars who were probably expecting us to be on yesterday, but not the case. Again, if you're joining us late, the Giants had an open practice for the media today, so we thought it would be better to come on tonight. And so we're free to speak about what we saw. That's the reason we moved the show to Thursday. Also, because we had interviews that we were allowed to do. We had Coach Brian Daboll today. We had Darius Slayton. We had Paul Dottino. And we also had Tyrone Tracy. So, much better to do a show after those availabilities and an open practice so we can share some stuff with you. Paul, when is mandatory minicamp, says Cody? That's going to be Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, which again reminds me, we'll be back here. Our last two shows of the spring will be next Tuesday and next Wednesday, both at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Both of those days are the mandatory minicamp when the team will practice. They'll be open to the media, and we will have interviews to do. So that's why it makes sense. And then once that's completed on Wednesday, the players are off for summer vacation, and we will do the same thing on this program. And when the players come back, we'll be back and bring you some more of the Big Blue Breakdown live. Cody says, I heard the Giants and Jets will have joint practices. Any truth to that? Yes, there is. Aaron Glenn told the Jets media a couple of days ago. Brian Daboll told the Giants media today. There'll be one day at Florham Park and one day in East Rutherford where both of the teams will practice against each other. That will no doubt be the week of the Jets preseason game, which is Saturday, August the 16th. That's the date of the Giants-Jets game. So figure the week leading into that, there'll be these home-and-home practices with the Giants and the Jets. Neither coach gave the dates of those practices when they addressed the media. So I don't have that, but you have to figure it's going to be that week leading into the game of August 16th. A couple more here. Cody says, awesome, by the way, for sure. And Armand Duda says, what are your biggest priorities for this coming season? Mine is to finally be competitive in the division. Well, Armand, I think that's as good a reason as good of a priority as any, right? I mean, John Mara, the co-owner, said after last season, got to feel better about this team at this time next year. Well, how do you feel better about the team? You become a heck of a lot more competitive, and specifically in your division. So I think you make a very good point, a very fair point, a very valuable point, and I don't think anybody would argue or dispute that with you. So yeah, I'm all on board with that one. I think that makes perfect sense to me. I mean, look, Wellington Mara always said the number one priority that he had every season was to make sure that when the fans came to the last home game of the regular season, they had a reason to cheer. In other words, the translation is that you're still in the race. That's your last home game on the schedule. In this case, it's going to be Week 18, July 3rd or 4th at home against the Dallas Cowboys. What you want is to know that you go into that weekend with a chance of mathematically still having an opportunity at being a wild card. It's that simple. And yes, maybe there's 5 other games that need to fall a certain way for it to happen. Maybe that's what it will take to get you into the playoffs. Beating Dallas and having 5 other scores go a certain way. But that still keeps you alive. It keeps you mathematically in the race. as opposed to much of the past decade when the Giants have been out of it long before Thanksgiving and sometimes at Halloween. So, Cody Dunbar says, good evening. Thank you for all you do. I appreciate you, Cody. Thank you. And he says, go Giants, shock the world. Well, that'll do it for this edition of the Big Blue Breakdown live on the New York Giants on SI Media Channel and YouTube Network. So glad you could join us tonight. Again, I'm Paul Dottino. We will be back with you next Tuesday and next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time with 2 more live shows to bring you all of the information from the mandatory minicamp and maybe even have a special guest or two. We're going to see how that works out. Depends on who wants to come out and watch the practices. Got to be out of practice to watch if we're going to talk to you about it, right? So we will talk to you then again next week. Until then, everybody, be well, enjoy your week, and we'll be back here next Tuesday.